All right, chapter 9 of The Fall of Fergal. When Mr. Peach had finished his third and final poem made up on the spot, this one was about pyramids, suggested by a gray-haired gentleman with a mop and bucket at the back, Malcolm bounded back onto center stage. Well, at the end of this first round, Graham Large and LaFay McNally have yet to make a single mistake. Perfect scores, you two. Well done. Peggy Snoot has made 2 and Anna Malting has made 3. Which means I'm afraid that we have to say farewell to Anna, but I must remind her that in Tappentype's opinion, she's a winner to have reached the grand finals. He started to clap and the whole audience joined in as Anna stood up, lower lip trembling, and walked off stage. Passing LaFay at her computer terminal, she whispered, "I hope you win." The two girls smiled at each other. Anna's computer screen above the stage was switched off. Now there were 3. In this second round, Malcolm went on, Hieronymus Peach has 10 sentences to say to you. Once each sentence has been spoken, you will type the words of the sentence in reverse order. We're not asking you to spell the words backward, just to type the words in reverse order. For example, if he were to say, "The cat sat on the mat," you would type, "Mat, the, on, sat, cat, the." Don't worry about capital letters, periods, and the like. Do worry about apostrophes and stop typing the moment you hear the gong. Clear? Clear, said the 3 remaining contestants, who had had it explained to them beforehand, but of course had no idea what sentences the extraordinary Mr. Peach might come up with. Ready, Mr. Peach? Ready, said the mustached ventriloquist and beat poet. Sentence number 1. He put on the snake glove puppet the other McNallys had seen by the huge hole. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. LaFay frantically typed, "Peppers pickled of peck a picked Piper Peter," which isn't as easy as it may sound, especially now that Mr. Peach already had another puppet on his hand which appeared to be saying, "Round and round the rugged rock the ragged rascal ran." Ran, rascal, ragged the rock, rugged the round and round, LaFay typed. The sentences came thick and fast, which is a phrase I've been wanting to use for ages, and it seems to fit really nicely here, without a join, so as long as I don't call too much attention to it. It was in the very last sentence that LaFay made her first mistake. What Hieronymus Peach said was, "Are you sure she sells seashells on the seashore anymore?" LaFay typed, "More, any, shore, sea, the, on, shells, sea, sells, she, shore, you are." The order of the words was fine, but in all the confusion of having to do everything backward, she spelled sure as shore. She realized this and was just about to change it when the gong for the end of the round was sounded. Malcolm checked the screens and toted up the scores. Peggy Snoot didn't make a single mistake this time. Well done, Peggy. Whereas both LaFay McNally and Graham Large made 1 mistake each. LaFay sighed with relief she was still in the game, which makes the scores at the end of this round, Graham and LaFay with 1 mistake each, Peggy with 2. So I'm sorry, Peggy, we have to say congratulations and goodbye to you. There were claps as she began to walk across the stage, and then everything suddenly plunged into darkness. The clapping stopped and there were murmurs of, "What's happening?" "Power cut!" shouted a voice. The reason why it was so dark without the lights was that although there was daylight outside, all the blinds in the room had been pulled down over the windows so that the stage could be lit with electric lighting to the best effect. It had taken a while to eliminate any glare from the 4 giant computer screens above the stage, all of which had now gone blank. There were sounds of scurrying around then, and then, a minute or 2 later, Malcolm opened one of the blinds and sunlight streamed through a window. "Sorry about this, folks. We'll find out what's happening," and at that moment, the lights came back on, the computers booted up again, and the 3 screens flickered to life. Peggy's was switched off now that she'd left the stage, which left Graham Large's screen top left and LaFay McNally's bottom right. At that moment, the lights... Oh, we already read that. Malcolm pulled the blind back down and jumped back up onto the stage. Out of the corner of his eye, Fergal thought he caught a flash of something electric blue lurking in the shadows by the edge of the stage, but thought nothing of it. "Apologies for the added drama," said Malcolm, who not only proved that he was a very nice man, but also that he was very good at his job. Now we come to the final round of the grand finals of the Tap and Type competition. By the end of this round, we will be left with one runner-up and one national champion. This final round was straightforward enough. It relied on good spelling ability and speedy typing without errors. Mr. Peach slipped on a glove puppet of a crocodile wearing a mortarboard, one of those flat square caps with a tassel on it that teachers wear in old movies and graduation students throw up in the air, a bit like a carpet tile, and began a quick fire of long words. Immediately, coeducation, disinherited, unnecessarily, and so on. No sooner had he finished than the gong sounded. In their second row seats, Jackie, Albie, Joshua, and Fergal had their eyes glued on LaFay's screen, and what they saw horrified them. It was full of mistakes, littered with them. You name it, she spelled it incorrectly. It was a total disaster. Had their sister finally lost her nerve? Had reaching the final round of the finals been too much for her and she'd gone to pieces? She looked calm and confident enough sitting up there, but what was she feeling on the inside? Graham Large was looking pretty pleased with himself as he sat at his keyboard, but he seemed to have every reason to. As far as Jackie could see, he'd only made 2 or 3 mistakes at most. Malcolm walked back to the center of the stage and thanked Hieronymus Peach for the final time as he popped the crocodile glove puppet into his valise and was cheered off the stage. Waving to the audience, Malcolm then turned to the screens. From where LaFay was sitting, she could see the surprise on his face. He frowned again and looked at both screens carefully. Feeling what he did about LaFay and Graham Large, Malcolm didn't want to humiliate the young McNally girl in front of the audience by announcing the terrible number of mistakes she'd made in the final round. Instead, he went straight to the announcement. After local and regional heats, just 4 people made it to today's National Grand Finals. 4 people who can count themselves winners for just being up here on this stage today. There were claps and cheers. But there can only be 1 runner-up and 1 champion. And the runner-up is LaFay McNally. The crowd cheered, and LaFay came to the front of the stage. She really thought she'd had a real chance of winning it. If only I hadn't made those few mistakes at the end, she thought. Whatever I think of Graham Lard as a person, he must be good at this and deserves to win the competition. Malcolm shook her warmly by the hand. Well done for being runner-up, LaFay, he said. Let's have your family up here. Jackie, Joshua, Albie, and Fergal didn't need asking twice. LaFay might not have won, but they were all very proud of their sister. They all tried to hug her at once, and Fergal, being the smallest, got pushed to the back and almost tripped over the spaghetti of wires hidden behind a curtain, connecting all the computers, keyboards, screens, and lights. Forever inquisitive, he realized how they switched off one of the big screens above the stage when a contestant was eliminated. They simply pulled the particular cable jack plug from its socket. The 2 remaining screens, his sister LaFay's and winner Graham Large's, were still plugged in. Red jack plug into green socket and green jack plug into red. Jackie was tugging him. Time to get off the stage with LaFay, holding the runner-up scroll. When Graham Large went up to accept the winning prize from the chairman of Tap and Type himself, Count Medoc Silverman, the whole front row of the audience leapt to their feet and clapped and cheered. 2 photographers came forward, one from one of the capital city's leading evening newspapers, and another in an electric blue suit. LaFay recognized him as the photographer working for the Large Lunches Company magazine. Fergal recognized him as the electric blue-colored shape he'd seen lurking in the shadows after the power cut, lurking near where the wires were connecting the overhead screens to the computers. What had Fergal seen up on stage? A red jack plug in a green socket and a green jack plug in a red. Then the blinding truth hit Fergal like a bolt of lightning, or like he would hit the pavement later on. The cables must be color-coded. Green was supposed to go into green and red in red. The sockets had been switched in the so-called power cut, which meant that whatever Graham typed would appear on LaFay's screen above the stage and whatever she typed would appear on his. All Graham Large would have had to do was type plenty of deliberate mistakes, which would appear on LaFay's big screen as hers. He knew that she was good and would make very few mistakes, and that's what would appear on his screen. He was guaranteed to win. The cheat. Fergal tugged at Jackie's arm, and she leaned toward him in her seat to hear what he had to say above the whoops and cheers of the Large family. She had suspiciously good hearing for a mere human being. Her eyes widened in anger and amazement as she realized what her little brother was saying. But what should she do? She couldn't simply stand up and say, "Cheat!" What if they were wrong? She couldn't be 100% sure that the electric jack plugs and sockets were color-coded. Pushing her way past people in her row with "excuse me" after "excuse me," as she banged against their knees, Jackie made it over to Mr. Peach, who was standing in the side aisle. Fergal could see her explaining everything with frantic hand gestures. The next thing he knew, the ventriloquist had made his way up on stage and had disappeared behind the grinning Graham Large and his immediate family. The room fell silent as Graham stepped forward and began his acceptance speech. "The saying goes, 'May the best man win,'" he sneered, "and as the only man against 3 girls, you might think my winning a foregone conclusion." Just then there was a loud fizz, and the 2 screens above them went blank, only to come to life again seconds later, but with the badly spelled words on largest screen and the ones with very few errors on LaFay's. There was a gasp and muttering from the audience and confusion on the stage where they didn't know what was going on until, following the eyes of those below, they too turned to look up at the screens. Malcolm Kent hurried back onto the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, grinning from ear to ear, "I'm sorry to report that owing to some confusion in the power cuts, some misconnections were made, resulting in Master Graham Large's 26 typing and spelling errors," he really emphasized the number, "appearing on Miss McNally's screen by mistake. I therefore reverse the order of finalists and declare LaFay McNally the rightful winner and Tap and Type national champion." He hadn't actually called Large a cheat, you'll notice. That's not good for business, but everyone knew what he meant. Everyone who wasn't a Large looked outraged and delighted both at once. Before LaFay knew what was happening, Jackie, Albie, Joshua, Anna Malting, and her mom were carrying LaFay shoulder high up the steps onto the stage. Fergal's arms weren't long enough, but he, and Peggy Snoot, ran up with them. Then the disgraced Graham Large, meanwhile, was running off stage in the opposite direction, blubbing like a baby, but a very big one, old enough to know better. Fergal felt a hand pat him on the shoulder. "A nice piece of detective work, my boy," said Mr. Peach. "Well done." Meanwhile, out in the foyer, a real detective was planning his next move. That was Twinkle-Toes Tweedy, of course, and he was about to haul LaFay McNally off for questioning in his linen closet of an office.